Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading you a story called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and it's from this lovely book here, Romance and Legend of Chivalry by A.R. Hope Moncrief. So I really hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. At Camelot, in all mirth and jollity, King Arthur kept Christmas with his knights of the Round Table. When they sat down to dinner on New Year's Day, the king, looking round upon that goodly brotherhood, was moved to wish aloud that soon they might hear of some marvellous adventure to spice their feast. Scarcely had he spoken, when as the first course was served, there rode into the hall a knight unknown to the eyes turned upon him in astonishment. He was the tallest man anyone had ever beheld, and the strangest in guise and looks. His face was as fierce as his limbs were stalwart. His red eyes glowed out of a shock of bristly hair, and over his broad breast hung a beard big as a bush. From head to foot he was dressed in a green coat, hood and hose, only his spurs being of bright gold. His horse too was green as grass, its mane knotted with golden threads, its tail tied with a jewelled green band, its green trappings hung with golden bells. He wore no armour and bore neither spear nor shield, but in one hand a green holly bough, in the other a huge axe, sharp as a razor, its handle and its head richly chased in gold and green. Never before had been seen at Arthur's court such a man nor such a steed. All sat dumbfounded as he gazed around, as if asking who might be the chief of the company. Then Arthur was first to address him courteously. "Light down from horse, sir, and sit with us at our feast, if so please thee." "I came not to feast nor to tarry," answered he, "but to prove the courage of this famous fellowship." "If it be battle ye seek, there is many a one here will take your challenge," quoth the king, at which the stranger laughed loud and long. "Ha! Had I come here to fight, I should not have left my arms at home. Here I see but beardless children to match the like of me. I come to try them with a Christmas sport. Is any of ye bold enough to fetch one blow at me with his axe, on condition that next New Year's Day he shall stand a stroke from my hand?" All the knights were silent, as the green giant rolled his eyes and bent his brows first on one, then on another, but no one cared to offer himself for such an exchange of blows. "And this is the Round Table and Arthur's court, of which mighty boasts are made," he sneered, so that the king was stung by shame and wrath to take the defiance on himself for the honour of his knighthood. "Give me the axe and have at thy head," he cried. "Thou shalt see if we fear thy broad steel any more than thy big words." The Green Knight sprang from his horse and put the axe into Arthur's hands, but now the others held him back, saying that this was no adventure for their king. "Grant me the chance," begged his nephew Sir Gawain, youngest of all his knights, and the rest backed him up, holding that game more seemly for a young man to play. "So be it," said Arthur, unwillingly yielding the axe. "But see thou puttest such heart and hand into thy stroke that he shall never pay thee back." The Green Knight smiled grimly, asking the name of him with whom he would swap blows. And when he heard it was Gawain, he said, "It likes me well to take a blow at Sir Gawain's hand, but first he must swear to seek me out within a 12-month and a day, hence that I keep next New Year by giving back what I got from him." "I swear, but where shall I seek thee?" "When thou hast struckest the blow, I will tell thee where to find me. If I speak not, so much the better for thee. Now do thy best." With this the giant made ready to stand a stroke. Turning his back on Gawain, he drew down his collar and pushed aside his long hair, so as to unbare his neck to the axe. Then, stroking his bushy beard with unmoved countenance, he awaited what should come. The young knight grasped the heavy axe, heaved it on high, measured his blow with steady eye, and delivered it with all the strength of his arm. Down it came on the brawny neck, shearing through skin and bone, so that the hairy head fell on the floor, and the green garments were dabbled with blood. The giant had stood firm without flinching or saying a word. Now, before anyone could stir, he picked up his own head, sprang on his horse, and rode from the hall. The king called out, the queen screamed, and the knight stared. Then, as the green one passed out of sight, the head in his hand moved its eyes upon Gawain, and opened its mouth to say, "I have thy word, at the Green Chapel next New Year's Day we meet again, that I may do unto thee as thou hast done to me. Look that thou fail not." or be forever stained as a recreant knight. Here is an adventure indeed, such as well beseems Christmastide, spoke Arthur, turning to cheer his dismayed queen. The rest of the company knew not whether to laugh or to shudder over the prodigy that they had beheld. It made talk for their banquet and through all the revels of the season. Many pitied Gawain, who next New Year must keep such a promise to one who could live with his head stricken off. Then, by and by, the wonder out of sight began to go out of mind. But Gawain did not forget, who had to fear that but one more year was his to live. For him the months passed by too quickly. After Christmas came Lent, bringing showers to brighten the grass and swell the buds, among which birds sang for the joy of the summer at hand. Next the warm sun kissed out flowers shining with dewdrops, then leafy trees and yellow harvests mantled the earth's dusty nakedness. But with Michaelmas the leaves began to fall, and the ripe fruit to grow rotten, and the green grass to go grey. And soon winter was back again, when Gawain should hold himself ready for that dread tryst. The king was first to remind him that he must not fail to keep his day, and at All Hallows he made a feast for his nephew, whose friends and kinsmen now took farewell of him as one they might never see again. Since he knew not where the Green Chapel might be, it behoved him to start betimes in search of it. On his good horse Gringolet, in full armour, and wearing his richest attire, he rode out alone from Camelot. Much warm water, says the minstrel, poured out of his fair eyes, for so gallant a youth going forth a victim to that man of such unearthly strength. Far and wide rode Gawain, through England and Wales, asking here and there after the Green Knight and his Green Chapel, but no man could tell him where they might be found. Many a hill he climbed, many a ford he crossed, many a miry marsh, and at bridge or pass he must often do battle with some knight who held it against all newcomers. Often, too, he was in peril from wild bulls and boars, and wolves and serpents, and savage men, but through all he won his way unhurt. Worst was the sharp winter cold, when he must sleep in his armour on naked rocks pelted by sleet and rain. He had not been hardy and hearty as few, had he not been hardy and hearty as few, he would never have come so far safe and sound. But when he had thus travelled for weeks, still he could hear no word of that Green Chapel, and the dark year was drawing to an end. On Christmas Eve he found himself lost in a great wood of hoary and mossy trees, where no paths could be seen and no voices heard, but the birds piping for cold upon leafless branches. Of the Virgin Mary he prayed this boon, that before nightfall he might be guided to some dwelling of men, among whom to hear mass and keep the holy season as beseemed. And lo, as he raised his eyes through an opening of the wood, he was aware of a noble castle set on a hill, and so that it stood out so brightly against the glow of the setting sun. Spurring his weary horse, he reached the gate before it was dark. The drawbridge being let down, Gawain bid the porter tell his lord that a wayfarer besought lodging for one night. There was no want of hearty welcome. The lord of the castle, a tall and sturdy knight, came out to greet the guest, and with him his fair lady. Squires took Gawain's horse to stable, while his host led him to a tapestried chamber and sent a page to undo his armour. When he was washed and attired himself in his best, he went down into the hall, where a godly Christmas company was gathered. Great honour and kindness they showed the stranger, and more when he named himself as of Arthur's Round Table, which over all the land was famed for courteous manners and noble knighthood. He was set down beside the lovesome young mistress, all smiles for such a guest, and to the other end of the board the lord led an aged wrinkled crone, whom Gawain marvelled to see, made much of above many a beautiful and richly clad dame. That night he feasted choicely and slept softly, as he had not fared since he left Camelot on this dolorous quest. In the morning the lord and lady would by no means let him leave them, to keep Christmas among bears and wolves. For 3 days Gawain stayed at their hospitable castle, feasting with all mirth and good cheer, before he began to ask his road to the Green Chapel, declaring that he was bound to be there on New Year's Day, but on what errand he kept to himself. If that were so, his host told him, he might stay 3 days longer, for the Green Chapel was close at hand, to which he himself would put on the way. The knight was well pleased to know his journey so near an end, and gladly agreed to repose here for the rest of the week. Then this jovial host, taking him to be wearied by long travel, bid him lie at home all day while he went out to hunt, and he proposed a strange bargain between them. "Whatever you get each day shall be mine in exchange for what I win in the woods." "So be it," agreed Gawain, falling in with his humour, and they pledged themselves to that compact in a friendly cup. Next morning, the lord of the castle went out before daybreak with hounds and huntsmen, while Gawain took his ease in his chamber. Here he was visited by the hostess, before whom he in vain feigned to be asleep, when, making eyes at him and rallying him on his sluggishness, she did not hide that her heart was given to this handsome young man. "I am unworthy of such favour," pleaded the good knight, and when she mocked at his modesty, he let her know plainly how he might offer her no service but what a knight owed to all ladies. He durst not be untrue to his honour by deceiving a truthful host, and the errand he came on was one that quenched all thoughts of love. But the sportive dame, laughing at his scruples, did not go without giving him a kiss. Then he could rise and banish temptation by hearing mass in the castle chapel. The rest of the day he spent with the ladies, well pleased to have the company of that aged crone, before whom the young mistress must sure bear herself discreetly. Back came the lord at evening with his quarry of venison, which he bestowed on Gawain according to their agreement, and in return the guest embraced him with a kiss, as all he had got at home. "Ha! And who gave it thee?" demanded his host, but Gawain laughed off at that question as not in their bond. They then sat down to supper, the best of friends. Then, when the cock had crowed thrice next morning, the hunter again set out for the woods. Again in his absence, Gawain was visited by the wilful dame, who should not shake his fidelity to virtue, but this time gave him 2 kisses before she ceased to play the temptress. Her husband at night brought home a boar as game due to his guest, whom this time he had given 2 kisses to him in return, but did not confess where he had gotten them. Now he would have taken leave for next morning, but the hearty host would not hear of his going, and promised that on New Year's Day he should be at the Green Chapel betimes. The 3rd day dawned cold and clear, and the lord had gone off to hunt when his wife once more came wooing her guest to sinful dalliance, having awakened him from his dream of his sore ordeal at the Green Chapel. Again he minded her of her duty and of his own, but for all his resolution not to be a traitor to hospitality, she gave him 3 kisses, and would have him take from her a gold ring as a parting gift. The knight, blushing for kisses given him behind a husband's back, refused on the score that he had nothing to give her in return, but next she offered him the girdle she wore, braided with green silk and fringed with gold. "Thou dost wrong to scorn it for a poor gift," said she, when he would still have denied her. "Know that this girdle, simple as it seems, hath power to make any weapon harmless against whoever wears it." Since her gift was so well worth having, Gawain let himself be overcome by love of life. He took the girdle, promising to keep it a secret between them 2. Yet his conscience pricked him, so after hearing mass he got himself shrived by the priest that he might be clear from sin when on the morrow he had to deal with that fearsome Green Knight. Still was he ill at ease to find the dim eyes of the aged lady bent on him with a cunning smile, as if she well knew what he had to hide. As he looked hard at her, it seemed to him that this crone took airs of youth and beauty, till he asked himself if it were not she who had tempted him in the dream. This last evening the hunter brought home no more than the skin of a foul fox, which he called a poor reward for the 3 kisses. Gawain had been lucky enough to get and duly bestowed, but said not a word of the girdle he had hidden about him. As before, they sat down to meat, spending the hours in carols and jollity, as merry as if the guest were not bound the next day to depart, but on what an errand he would not tell. Through the night Gawain slept ill, and heard every cock crow that brought in a cold and stormy New Year's Day. He rose and arrayed himself, taking good care to belt twice around him that green girdle said to have such magic power. His heart somewhat misgave him, yet he bore himself gallantly as he bade farewell to his hosts, thanking them for their good entertainment. Then he mounted his horse, Gringolet, and rode through the snow and wind, a servant being sent with him as a guide to the Green Chapel. Then they went in by twilight to the rugged cliffs and dark moors, where every hilltop wore a cap and a cloak of cloud. As the sun rose, the guide stopped short at the head of the dale winding into the snow-dappled heights. Hence ye must fare alone, said he. This is the road that will bring thee too soon to the Green Chapel. But, good sir, take thought, for one dwells there that lets none pass without deadly scathe. The best knight in Arthur's court could not be safe from him. Let him be, and go some other way. For my part, I swear to tell no man how ye shun so perilous an encounter. If it were a coward's part for me to turn back, having come so far to find this Green Chapel, answered Gawain. Well, if ye list to be done with life, ride down the path to the bottom of the dale, and there on the left look for the place and the man ye seek. For all the gold on earth I would not go nearer. With this he turned back, but the knight fared on, commending himself to heaven. The dale was shut in by steep banks, where look as he might, he saw nothing like a chapel, till in the crag on the left opened the mouth of a dark cave, all overgrown by weeds and grass, so that he had almost passed it by. Tying his horse to a tree, he climbed up the rocks to peer into the cave. If this be the Green Knight's oratory, it is the most unblessed church I ever saw, quoth he, and his voice was echoed back by the fearsome din, like a clattering of rocks and a grinding of scythes, and the whir of a mill wheel all at once. Who dwells here? Cried Gawain, bearing himself stoutly, spear in hand. And what would he with me? Stand still, replied a voice above his head, and have now what ye came for. From among the rocks strode forth a huge figure bearing a mighty axe. It was the Green Knight, his hairy head sound as ever on his body, who met Gawain with this greeting. Welcome to my abode. Rightly have ye timed your travel and honestly kept tryst. Now to make good on our bargain. Down with spear and doff helmet, to stand the blow I have owed thee since last New Year's Day. I am ready, said Gawain, unlacing his helmet and leaning forward so as to offer his bare neck to the steel without any sign of fear. But as the Green Knight swung the axe aloft to bring it down, the other could not help shirking his shoulders a little when he thought the stroke was about to fall. Ha! Is this the brave Sir Gawain that flunches before he is hurt? Bawled the big man. I bore thy blow better when my head rolled on the ground. If my head comes off, I cannot put it back, said Gawain, but I give my word not to flinch again. A second time the axe was brandished over his head, and now he stood like a stone, waiting for the blow that did not come. Hit on and have done, exclaimed he, as the axe whizzed harmlessly through the air. So bold, jeered the foreman, then I must make an end. With both hands he heaved the axe, frowning so fiercely and planting his feet so firmly that Gawain gave up his head for lost. Down swung the blow, and this time the knight did not move a jot as the sharp edge struck his neck, cutting through his skin. Yet but for the smart and a few drops of blood sprinkled on the snow beneath him, he stood none the worse. Half stunned with amazement, as soon as he felt the head fast on his shoulders, he drew his sword to face the Green Knight, crying, One stroke have I taken, and that was all of our covenant. Hast thou more to give? I can now pay thee fairly back. The giant-like fellow leant on his axe, turning to Gawain a friendlier face, which he soon remembered as that of his late host, the lord of the castle, strangely disguised by those green trappings and by the bushy beard. Brave knight, ye need not be wroth, said he. I could have dealt with thee better or worse than I would. The 3 blows I fetched at thee were for my wife's kisses given behind my back. Nay, take no shame. I set her to try thee, and found thee true in faith and honour, as beseemed a knight. Yet love of life tempted thee to hide from me the gift of her girdle. For that fault I let thee feel how much sorer I might have struck. Was it well thus to come short of the truth? Gawain stood confounded by his own weakness, and by the generosity of him with whom he had to do. Cursed be the cowardice that had made me false to my word, he exclaimed, unclasping the green girdle to give it back to his host, who laughingly refused it. Thou hast confessed so clear, and done such penance under my axe, that I hold thee for absolved. Keep the green girdle as a token of thy adventure at the Green Chapel with the Green Knight, to whom thou hast worthily paid thy debt, and each owes neither not on this New Year's Day. Ah, said Gawain, had I done worse, I should but have been like our forefather Adam and Samson and Solomon, and many other men that have let themselves be beguiled by women. But heaven reward thee for the girdle, which I shall wear to mind thee of how I failed through cowardice, and the look at it shall avail to abate my pride if I ever forget. And now, sir, tell me thy name ere we part. The Green Knight told him that he was called Sir Bernlake, and how in his house lived the mighty Morgan le Fay, no other than the ill-favoured crone Gawain had wondered to see held in such honour. She it was that had endowed him with those magic charms and set him on to trouble Arthur's court out of hatred to Queen Guinevere. After that was past and gone, he bid Gawain return with him to the castle and be made better known to the fairy who, as Arthur's sister, was his own aunt. But Gawain had no mind for dealings with this uncanny kinswoman. Taking leave of Sir Bernlake, like old friends, he rode homewards through thick and thin, and never stopped till he came to Camelot, to be welcomed with joy as one from the dead. The cut in his neck had quickly healed, but there was the scar to witness the tale he had to tell, and he showed the green girdle, which he wore in penance for his faint-heartedness. That one fault he confessed with shame, but Arthur comforted him, saying that the bravest man alive might well shrink from a lonely death. And all the brotherhood of the Round Table agreed for Gawain's sake to wear such a green belt as he brought back in the token of his adventure with the Green Knight. The end.